Welcome all to Colorado, those of you from out of state. I'll warn you, in my past life, I spent 16 years in the brew pub business, the restaurant business, the tavern business. So at this time in the morning is not the best for me to inspire or uplift. That being said, I think I can guarantee all of you that you will be inspired and uplifted later. You're going to get two of the smartest, most creative and wisest people I know, Dr. Condoleezza Rice and Joel Klein. You're going to get to hear people that have spent a great deal of time thinking about education. I want to recognize and thank PATRICIA LEVESQUE, CEO of the Foundation for Excellence in Education, for really creating or helping to create and expand this enterprise. You're going to see the rain will clear off. You're coming to Colorado and saying, where's the 300 days of sunshine I keep hearing about? Where's this incredibly moderate temperature? It's coming. You will be thrilled. And the bottom line is that every season is it's a beautiful time of year in the Centennial State. And you should try, now you've got important work to do here, but try and get out and see the rest of the downtown here. One of the reasons I got elected, one of the reasons I even went into public service was we took the old historic district lower downtown and we put a large restaurant down by the train station. And my partner has since bought me out. But the rent in 1987 when we signed that lease was $1 per square foot per year. Just to give you a frame of reference, if you go down there and look around lower downtown now and see what a revitalized downtown and what a really vibrant city looks like, I think you'll be pretty excited. We have leaders from all over the country in this room. We have a number of local legislators. I kind of peered out from behind the curtain. I saw at least a dozen state senators, state representatives, city council members, a couple of mayors from Colorado. So I'm not going to try and list names or I'd get into serious trouble. But I think the leaders in this room, what you're creating is a collaborative network where you're able to work together, strive for excellence, and refuse to settle for anything less. And I think that ability to collaborate, combined with real leadership, not partisanship, but real leadership, really is going to lead to success. And I'm not sure I'm aware of any other enterprise in this country where we've spent so much money and had such lackluster results. But I have this sense that we're very close, that there is going to be a tipping point here. And one of the challenges you guys all have to come up with is figuring out what are these connections in the entire arc of education, and B, how do we take those examples where we know it works, and how do we take them to scale, right? To scale in real time. My son Teddy, who's 13, and he could actually do a better job speaking here than I could, but he's at a Denver Public Schools, what they call an innovation school. It's a longer school day. It's 8 hours instead of 6.5 hours. It's a longer school year. I think it's 207 days versus 185 days. But the most amazing thing is there's no homework. So he's in 8th grade. This changed our lives. Let me tell you, if you want to see transform the lives of parents and their children, figure out a way that longer school day results in no homework so that parents don't have to nag and be always ragging on their kids, and that you really can see, you can participate more fully in your kids' lives. Now, this school is 3 years old. There are now a number of other examples that are looking at this facet of how combining a longer school day with a longer school year and no homework, right? Because that's part of the key part of the equation. We know that longer school day works. We know the longer school year works, but it hasn't been palatable to parents for a variety of reasons. I'm not saying this is the answer. I'm just saying it's one of those examples that when it seems to be working. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is the 10th best middle school in the entire state of Colorado, and it's got over half their students are free and reduced lunch. So it's got the same challenges as many urban schools, but it is obviously succeeding significantly in many ways. It's not good enough, and I'm not holding it up as the end-all, but it is one of those examples that we have to figure out how to get to scale rapidly, because we are, I just came back from a 12-day trip. We spent 3 days in Japan, 4.5 days in China, a couple days in Istanbul, Turkey, 3 days in Israel. They are coming, right? The rest of the world is very focused on using the models that we created, and they're doing everything they can to make sure they do a better job. And this next generation of jobs, the rest of the world wants them, right? They're not going to let us cherry pick the best jobs, the most value-added jobs, which we've been able to do for the last, well, for modern history, but especially in the last 10 or 20 years, even as we lost many manufacturing jobs, the higher value-added jobs have mostly stayed here. I don't think that's going to continue. One thing we need to avoid, and I think most of you know this, is to get past the partisan gridlock around education. This should not be a partisan issue. Both sides should be constantly trying to find compromises, get out of the way of partisanship. Here, our state school board is elected. It's a partisan election. And for the life of me, I can't see why we're worrying about whether someone's a Republican or a Democrat when they're trying to figure out how to properly educate our kids. I don't think we need. I don't think we need to have politics everywhere. So I'm laying out just a little mandate for you. I'm not capable of, and I don't have the history and the experience to provide the full context and the framework for the issues. You guys mostly know that already. But I will say that I'm going to push as hard as I can with a sense of urgency that you guys have a chance as a group, as this collaborative network, to really hit that tipping point and begin changing the achievement levels of our kids in real time. So don't shirk and don't blow it. Anyway, welcome to Colorado. Have a great conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Executive Officer for the Foundation for Excellence in Education, Patricia LeVesque.
Great. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you all. Governor HICKENLOOPER, thank you for that warm welcome. Governor HICKENLOOPER is an example of how strong, effective leaders can build coalitions centered on the success of children. Thanks to his efforts, the state of Colorado, the students will be benefiting from an investment in early literacy programs, higher academic expectations, and having more effective teachers in the classrooms. Their progress in Colorado is going to be measured by rising student achievement. And Governor HICKENLOOPER proves that this isn't a Republican issue or a Democratic issue, right? It's an all of us issue. Governor, thank you so much for your leadership and great work in the state of Colorado. And thank you everyone for attending our 8th annual National Summit on Education Reform. As I look around the room, it is fantastic to see so many returning faces, and it's wonderful to see new ones. Our goal this year is the same as it was 8 years ago. Over the next 2 days, we want to fill your minds and your hearts with ideas and inspiration that you can take back home so you can be champions for students. Just 60 miles down the road from where we sit this morning is the U.S. Air Force Academy, where they are training young men and women to serve our country. But our young men and women won't be able to join this noble cause if their schools have failed them. And today, 23% of the 17 to 20-year-olds taking the Armed Forces Qualifications Test do not pass. 23%. We can and we must do better for our students. So once again, during the next 2 days, you're going to hear so many ideas and be inspired, and I encourage you to steal them. Take those ideas, share them, take them home, and put them to work for your students. The future for your students, your state, and our country depend on it. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce one of the great pioneers of education reform. The day he became Chancellor of New York City Public Schools is the day the old order began giving way to the new. Not just in New York, but across the country. His influence and passion helped start this revolution, and his continued involvement ensures that it will endure. Please welcome Joel Klein.
Thank you, Patricia, and thanks for the incredible work you and Excellence in Education are doing. Governor HICKENLOOPER, thank you for being here, and thank you for the wise words you said. Education is far too important to allow it to be a partisan issue in America, and I appreciate your leadership on the issue. What an enormous privilege it is for me today to be able to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Secretary Condoleezza Rice. Hers is a story that's so uniquely American and so powerful, and so much understands why education is a transformative lever in this country. She grew up in the Jim Crow South in Birmingham, Alabama, and came from those humble and disquieting origins to be one of the world's most important leaders, thinkers, and players at virtually every level. She took over as Secretary, first as Director of the National Security Council and then as Secretary of State after 9/11 in a world that was changing rapidly. She not only helped to keep our nation safe, but she actually fashioned a new doctrine of world order, which she went around the world implementing, trying to figure out how to negotiate in a world that was increasingly challenging and perilous. You know, I admired her for a long time from a distance and thought not just what a great story, but what a remarkable leader this woman was. And I was a little afraid when I got assigned to co-chair a task force with her for the Council on Foreign Relations that, you know, sometimes people look better at a distance than they do up close. Well, Condi Rice looks a whole hell of a lot better up close than even the remarkable story I told you. Aside from everything else, she knows more about football than anybody I've ever known, both college and professional. She's a concert pianist, was provost at Stanford, played publicly the piano with Yo-Yo Ma. So I just wonder what you do in your spare time, Condi, because obviously you're not keeping busy enough in the things you're doing. But what's really impressed me about her today and why I'm so happy to introduce her to you is, what do you think one of the first things she did when she left the State Department? She asked the Council on Foreign Relations to do a report on education and national security, a report I was privileged to co-chair with her. And she concluded that the most important national security challenge this country faces, think about this, having come through the 8 years she came through, with the issues we face, the most important challenge is whether we remain true to our creed, as she always put it. In America, it's not where you come from, it's where you're going to. It's the life she lived and deep down understood that the real challenge for this nation is whether the American dream remains the American dream or becomes the American memory on our watch. And for her, education is at the heart of that. She said it in a report, immediately joined Excellence in Education, and now chairs the board. So for me, as I said, it's a special honor to introduce you to a friend, to a colleague, and a person I deeply admire, Secretary Condoleezza Rice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank my good friend Joel for that wonderful introduction. I also want to thank him for not saying something that people sometimes say when they introduce me, and she's been on the Stanford faculty for more than 30 years, because at that point I would hope you would think, my goodness, Stanford hired a faculty member at the age of 11? Isn't that just amazing? I want to thank Governor HICKENLOOPER for being here. This is my adopted home state, the state of Colorado. My parents and I moved here when I was 12 years old. My dad was an administrator at the University of Denver. My mom was actually a teacher in the Denver public school system whoa, that got a response. All right. My mom was a teacher in the Denver public school system at Gove Middle School. And I went down the road to St. Mary's Academy. So this city means a great deal to me. And Governor, your leadership of this state is extraordinary. Thank you for being here. I am delighted to be with you for this summit of the Foundation for Excellence in Education. I have decided that education is going to be at the core of what I do for as much time as God gives me. And so when I was asked to chair the board of this wonderful organization that Patricia and her staff run so well, Phil Handy, who's been a marvelous supporter, I thought, of course I can do it, because I guess Governor Bush has something else he wants to do for a little while. He's on vacation someplace, but I'm delighted to be with you as the chair of this board. I want to thank those of you who support this organization. I want to thank those of you who come year after year to be a part of this summit. And I want to remind us all that we are here because there is no more important issue before us as a country than the education of each and every child to the level of his or her potential. The great thinker and the great writer de Tocqueville visited the United States in 1835, and he went all over the country, and he wrote the great tome, Democracy in America, which I think is still the best book on democracy that's ever been written. But very often we forget some of the messages that he espoused in that book. He was stunned, for instance, at what he called the amazing localities and small groups in America that took on the process of governing and the work of democracy at the lowest possible levels. He understood that actually Washington, as important as it was not actually the center of the practice of democracy in America. Democracy in America was practiced in towns, in city councils, in state boards of education, in state houses, in legislatures. And he understood that that was really the strength of America, that people closest to the needs, closest to the desires, closest to the aspirations of the people were actually the ones trying to deliver on those aspirations. He understood something else, too. He was struck by what he called these voluntary associations of Americans who seemed to want to get together just to do good. In doing so, he understood one of the most important paradoxes of our country. When you're Secretary of State, you get to go out around the world, you get to see what people admire about us, what they fear, what they're concerned about. But I will tell you that when I was out there trying to explain Americans, I would say, you know, we are the most individualistic people on the face of the earth. If you violate our rights, we will take you to the Supreme Court, Brown versus the Board of Education, and if we win, we will change our laws. But we are also the most communitarian people on the face of the earth. People give of their time and their resources just to do good works in these voluntary associations. And so represented in this room are those two great traditions that make American democracy so strong. That the desires and aspirations of the people are cared for at levels of government that are closest to them, the states, the localities, the communities, and that people who want to advocate and to support great causes do so voluntarily in these associations that do good works. Each and every one of you is a part of that tradition. And we gather here because we in America share a view that every life is worthy. And if every life is worthy, every life is capable of greatness. And what more important venue for that belief than in the education of our children? We come here each year to share ideas, to hear inspiring stories, and to reaffirm our commitment to make children the center of everything that we do. Education is not for adults. It's not for the teachers. It's not for the unions. It's not for the politicians. It is actually for the children. And as Governor Hickenlooper so well said, it is not for those who would use our children as partisan fodder to divide us. Somehow, some way, the country, from all sides of the political spectrum, from all walks of life, has got to focus on our children. We come here to reaffirm that the work that we do in education has very, very high stakes. When Joel and I did the task force on national security reform and education, our national security and education reform for the Council on Foreign Relations, we brought together people from the educational reform movement, but also people who had served in the military, a former Secretary of the Army, people from the business community, because we wanted to make a statement that the education of our children is also not just the business of educators. It is the business of our country as a whole. The stakes are very, very high. Our competitiveness as a country is at stake. It used to be that greatness of a country could be defined and measured by what you could dig out of the ground, your resources. That was the 19th century world. And so if you had large stores of coal and iron ore, you were going to lead the future. And then, in the middle of the 20th century, it was really how efficient could you be in industrial processes? What could you do to move widgets along an assembly line more efficiently than the next guy? And that was the source of greatness in the industrial age. But in the 21st century, greatness comes from the mobilization of human potential. It comes from creativity and innovation. It comes from the ability to take an idea and apply that idea to some of the greatest challenges that we face. Technology is not in and of itself good or bad. Technology is neutral. When it is created, it has to be applied to our great challenges. And that's why we need to educate and train our children in both the technical aspects of life, STEM education. If I could just put in a plug, let's make them creative too. Let them play musical instruments. Let them write short stories. Let them appear in plays. And when those two come together, you have the full range of human potential. It was once said about Steve Jobs that had he not been a computer scientist, he might have been an artist. Those two come together in the mobilization of human potential. And in fact, the United States has mobilized human potential better than any country in the world, largely because we the people has not been an exclusive concept. You could come from any corner of this earth as an immigrant just to access the great national creed that it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. To show that through your hard work and your ability to take risk and your willingness to leave everything behind, you could come here and access the American dream. That's why we have all of those names, German names, French Canadian names. That's why we have Mexican Americans. That's why we have German Americans. That's why we have Korean Americans and Indian Americans. The ability to mobilize across boundaries and make people a part of we the people has been one of our strongest suits. But there was another part of it, too. It wasn't just if you came here, it was the notion that if you were here, you were not a prisoner of your class. That indeed, you could come from humble circumstances and do great things. But we know that the key to that was always a high-quality education. And so human potential came from all corners of the earth. and it came from all circumstances of life in the United States to make this country the most competitive and the most innovative and the most creative in human history. That's what's at stake. That this country continues to be creative and innovative and competitive, but that it does so not so that some people are a part of that and others are not. Because the very social fabric of our country, a country that is not united by ethnicity or religion or nationality, the very social fabric of the country depends on that promise that it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going, being true. In the work we have ahead of us here at the summit, we will talk about standards and achievement, accountability. We'll talk about the great teachers that we know. My mom was a teacher. We'll talk about how to help teachers who want to be great teachers be great teachers. But we'll recognize that we can't afford to have bad teaching in our schools. No good teacher wants to be dragged down by those who aren't good at the profession. We'll talk about choice for parents. I'm a great believer in public schools. The public schools are one of the great foundational institutions of American democracy. But I understand now, in the system that we have, that choice is allowed, but for those who can afford it. If you are well off, you will move to a district where the schools are good. Houses will be expensive in Palo Alto, California, and in Hoover, Alabama. Houses will be expensive in Fairfax County, Virginia, because you will move to a place where the schools are good. And if you're really well off, you'll send your kids to private schools. And who's stuck in failing neighborhood schools? Poor kids. And a lot of those are minority kids. And if you're not outraged when somebody says that a parent of that child should not be given the choice to move that child to a school where his or her potential can be reached, I don't know what will outrage you. We'll talk about ways to achieve choice, charters and vouchers and educational savings accounts. But wherever you come out on those specifics, we know that our children need greater opportunity and that it's not one size fits all for every child. And finding a way to make every child access his or her potential is our work. We'll talk about the digital revolution. We'll talk about how to equalize the benefits of technology for all. I mean, after all, you have to be sure that technology in the classroom, online learning, the ability to move at your own speed, is not just something that is accessible in a school that has means, or in a district close to Silicon Valley, where I live. Technology and the ability to use it is going to be so critical to the education of our children in the future. We have to make sure that it is democratized and available to all of our kids. And we will remind ourselves of the special duties that each and every one of us has. We will hopefully remind ourselves that education is indeed not a federal issue in the sense of how schools are run or standards or the like. But we are one country. We actually do want kids in Alabama and Colorado and Texas and Georgia and Vermont to have the same skills, to know the same things, to be able to do the same tasks. Because in a labor market that is completely open, it doesn't matter what state you came from, it matters what you know. And the federal government can advocate for that. We'd also ask that the federal government do no harm. When there are great experiments in the laboratory of innovation, the states, the federal government would step back and let the states do what de Tocqueville said. deliver on the aspirations of the people at a level that is close to them. We would ask, too, those who are here, and I know there are more state officials here this year than at any other time, thank you for the work that you do. In school boards, local and state departments of education, in state houses where you really are taking on the work of educational reform. Thank you, and keep up the hard work. We know, too, that advocacy is an important part of what we do. And so those of you who are here as advocates for children, I hope will also share ideas, network, stay in touch with one another. This is a great movement. And great movements are built on a couple of things. They're built on a sense that something's not right, and it has to be made right. And they're built on people who take the responsibility to get it done. Now, when we leave this place, I hope that we will be inspired by all that we've done, and that it'll take you back to the venue in which you work to continue that hard work. I just want to say, though, that what we're really committing here is to not accept the world as it is, but to work for the world as it should be. The world as it is a world in which I can look at your zip code and I can tell whether you're going to get a good education. The world as it should be is one in which every child's life is worthy and fulfilled. Education is the key to so many of the ills that we face. I know that poverty and broken families and social immobility and joblessness are critical issues. But education has always been our best intervention, our best lever to make sure that those evils do not produce another great evil, two societies, one capable and one not. This is an article of faith and has been in my family for years. I love to tell the story of my grandfather, Rice. He was a sharecropper's son in Utah, that would be E-U-T-A-W, I'm not kidding, Alabama. And when John Wesley Rice Sr. was a young man, he decided he wanted to get book learning in a college. Luckily for him, his mother, a freed slave, had taught him to read. And so he went off to Stillman College, about 60 miles from where he lived, and he had saved up his cotton to pay for college. After 1 year, they said, you know, you're going to have to pay for a second year. He said, I'm out of cotton. They said, you're out of luck. But thinking quickly, he said, how are those boys going to college? They said, well, you see, they have what's called a scholarship, and if you wanted to be a Presbyterian minister, then you could have a scholarship too. Granddaddy Rice said, that is exactly what I had in mind. And my family has been Presbyterian and college educated ever since. John Wesley Rice Sr. and his son, my father, and my mother would go on to be educational evangelists. They believed so strongly in the power of education that they would go door to door to say to a parent, your child's smart. Let us work with that child and send that child to college. Because they understood the transforming power of education. Education does help you, not to necessarily change your circumstances, but to deal with your circumstances in a way that they don't overwhelm you. Education gives you horizons about who you might be that you would never otherwise have. But we know that if it doesn't start now for each and every child, it will never happen. We won't accept that, and that's why we're here. Thank you very much.